Our case review is on Gary Ramona. We're going to introduce some of the key people into this case. So there's Gary Ramona. He was the vice president of marketing for Mondavi Winery. His wife, Stephanie Ramona. His eldest daughter, Holly Ramona. Holly Ramona's counselor, Marsh Isabella. And Holly Ramona's psychiatrist, Richard Rose.
So everything started when Holly came home from college one summer and her mom found her puking in the bathroom. Holly confided in her and said that she did have an eating disorder and wanted to start treatment. So she started therapy with Marsh Isabella, and Isabella had told her that 80% of people that had eating disorders had been sexually assaulted. So she asked if Gary had molested her, and she continually said no. But then after undergoing treatment, she received a look from Gary during one holiday that brought back some memories, and she was triggered, and she remembered between the ages of 5 and 8 being assaulted by her father. So in order to find the truth, Holly wanted to undergo a sodium amytal test, which supposedly you tell the truth when you're under this drug. So Richard, Rose, and Isabella administered the test, and during the test, they told her that she admitted that her father had assaulted her, and they told Holly that everything she said during this test was the truth.
So on May 4th, 1992, Holly Ramona filed a lawsuit against her father based on the allegations that had come up when she was in this sodium amytal interview. Gary and his lawyers moved for a summary judgment during the trial, which is a pre-trial judgment that basically states that the other person has no case and the case should be thrown out. And they assessed if the case should be thrown out based on the Kelly standard, which is a test that is used in U.S. courts to determine the admissibility of scientific evidence. And it provides that expert opinion based on scientific technique is admissible only when the technique is generally accepted as reliable in the scientific community. And the sodium amytal interview actually failed the Kelly test, or it's also called Kelly standard. So based on this, Holly's lawsuit was thrown out and the case was dismissed. In response to Holly filing this lawsuit and her accusations, Gary Ramona actually lost his job. He had like a $500,000 a year job at the winery. He lost that, and his wife filed for divorce. So he started to place a lot of blame on Holly's therapists and decided that he was going to file a lawsuit against them. So he filed a lawsuit against Marsh Isabella, Richard Rose, and Western Medical Center, which is the hospital that the sodium amytal interview was performed at. And he was asking for $8 million in damages. It was a highly publicized case because it was the first case where a non-patient third party sued a doctor for malpractice, and this was basically unheard of before this. So it opened the doors for a lot of other parents who were accused of sexually assaulting their children to do the same to their children's therapists. The jury ruled in favor of Gary Ramona. They granted him $500,000 in damages, which is about a year's pay for him, and not the $8 million that he originally wanted. They said that they focused mainly on the issue of negligence. They were concerned about the fact that Holly came in looking for bulimia treatment and then was immediately bombarded with questions about her childhood sexual abuse experiences, and that they weren't sticking to the point, so they thought that was valid enough to have a malpractice suit against the therapists.
So because of the different components of this case, we don't actually know whether any of what Holly Ramona claims happened or if Gary is hiding anything. So we decided to split this next part up into two sections of discussing his innocence or whether he was guilty. So we're going to start with Gary Ramona being innocent. Sodium amytal, it is a barbiturate derivative, and it is commonly used as a sedative, anti-anxiety medication, or pre-anesthetic. Those are its intended purposes. But after the war, World War II, and I think the Vietnam War, it began being used as a truth serum for patients on the battleground, seeing if they had any trauma. But this so-called truth serum isn't actually anything. They're put under the influence where they have a loss of inhibition, but they're easily suggestible. So in the case of using sodium amytal on Holly Ramona, it can be argued that because she already had this idea of maybe I was sexually abused as a kid, maybe my dad did do this, when she was under sodium amytal, that just made her even more suggestible. And sodium amytal, as mentioned earlier, is not admissible in court for any type of testimony. It's because of how easy it is to coerce false memories. And false memories is when somebody misremembers an event in their past, but they truly believed it happened. So there's research from researcher Elizabeth Loftus. She has several studies, Pickrell 1995 case, where they led 1/5 of participants to believe an event occurred in their childhood that actually never happened. It started with just building up rapport with them, asking them some questions about their childhood, and then she slipped in a phrase or some words. I believe the case is she asked them if they went to Disney World and if they had met Bugs Bunny, if he touched them weird, but Bugs Bunny was never at Disney World, so they were the 1/5 participants who do remember this happening in their childhood were misremembering it because Loftus used certain words to coerce that out. So false memories are extremely easy to manipulate, make, when using certain words, and it seems that the therapist and the counselor she saw might have caused her to think in a certain way by saying, oh, 80% of bulimia patients are sexually abused in childhood. And then that got her thinking, was I abused in childhood? And she starts picking up cues that she would have never picked up before. So that's the case for him being innocent.
So Dr. Lenore Terr, a psychiatrist and a researcher, testified on behalf of Holly, saying that there is a link between repressed memories and trauma. Victims usually put themselves in a trance during rape, and Holly exhibited all the signs of someone who had been sexually abused, from her being afraid of men, sleeping with her knees close to her chest, avoiding dates and kissing scenes, and a conviction that she would never marry. One study that Dr. Terr conducted was of 129 women. They had each been sexually assaulted and brought to the emergency room, and 20 years later, 38% of this group did not remember being raped. So this just goes to show that oftentimes victims block out the trauma in order to make it through. So memory repression is definitely possible, and that could have happened in Holly's case, which is why it took so long for her to come to the realization that she had been abused. Stephanie Ramona also gave a testimony on what Gary was like every day. She said he was incredibly abusive towards her, and he called the shots. Oftentimes he would hit her, and other times he was degrading, telling her that she couldn't go outside without wearing any makeup, and this just speaks to his aggressive nature. She also saw many things that were red flags, such as him always wanting her to leave so that she could babysit Holly alone. She also came home one day to find him washing Holly's sheets along with her underwear, and Holly didn't have any underwear on at the time. Holly often complained that her bottom hurt, and she had many UTIs as a child, along with nightmares where Stephanie would find Gary next to her consoling her when she had nightmares and he was in his underpants during this. And when Stephanie had told Gary that she thought Holly had been sexually assaulted, she says that Gary gave her the shut up look and totally dismissed it. So although there was no physical evidence, no DNA, no witnesses, there were many red flags throughout Holly's childhood that would have suggested abuse.
Our opinion on the case is kind of like shaped by the fact that there's not a clear answer whether or not Holly was sexually abused by Gary and if her memories were truthful. And because of this, our group has come to the consensus that we lean slightly more towards Gary being innocent, and this is mostly because there's simply not enough evidence to say that he's guilty, and he should be thought of as innocent until proven guilty. Of course, we do feel bad for Holly if this was true, and she would never get the justice that she deserves, but until there's more evidence that's put forth, it doesn't seem right to say that he's guilty of these crimes when we just don't know the truth of the matter. And we agree with how the court handled this case given the unusual circumstances, and I believe that I would have done the same thing if I was in their spot. I would have said that there's simply not enough evidence to say that this man's guilty, and obviously felt very bad for Holly because whether or not it is true, she does truly believe that that's what happened, and that is a lot to handle whether or not it is true or not. That's what she believes inside her own head, so it's kind of heartbreaking, but like I said, you really can't say that he's guilty without any definitive proof.